Good evening all, and welcome. The world around you is not what it seems. There could be more lurking in the darkest corners that you might not perceive. So get ready, get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. I am a mail carrier for the Postal Service. The route I am currently assigned to is a very rural route. Some of the homes are miles apart. A lot of farmland and cattle. This one particular home I deliver to has been on vacation mail hold for about a month. When the date of the hold was up, I deliver their mail per protocol. Well, 2.5 weeks have gone by, and no one had emptied the mailbox. Keep in mind, this is a very small town, and I am only one of 3 employees at the post office. I asked the clerk if they had maybe called about holding their mail longer, and I had just not got the memo. She then related to me something that happened around this time last year. Apparently, this time last year, the wife took a restraining and protection order out against her husband and disappeared for a few months. When the mail hold was over, it was another 2 months before the husband came into the office to get his mail. The wife soon returned to the home, but she is hardly ever seen. The clerk said that she thought the husband had killed the wife or something like that. Well, as of early February, when their mail went on hold, both of them were alive and well. The clerk told me what kind of vehicle the man drives, and that he is always towing a camper. I decided to drive down the long gravel lane, away from the main road and their mailbox, to their house. I just wanted to see if anyone was home and asked them to please empty their mailbox if they wanted to continue to get mail. As I drove up, I just got the weirdest vibe from the house. There was no truck or camper and no other cars. I pulled up to the very large 2-story plantation-style home, something that isn't very common where I live. I shut off my truck, and today was a fairly warm spring day, and I'd heard birds and cattle and horses all day long. Here in the driveway, there was nothing but silence. It was so heavy. It took me a few seconds to gather myself and actually get out of the truck. I'm not usually a scaredy cat, but there is something seriously unsettling about that house. I walked to the door just in case someone was home and knocked. I had a feeling that there was no one home, but I just wanted to cover all of my bases before making a work-related decision. When no one answered, I rang the doorbell for good measure and listened. It was deafeningly quiet, and then I heard a noise. It sounded like someone was tapping on the glass of the window in the door. I was looking right at it though, and there was nothing there and no one in the house that I could see. I quickly walked back to my truck and got the hell out of there. As I was tearing back down the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a woman in the 2nd-story window above the front door. I about started crying. I am not an emotional person. I don't know what the hell happened today. I've been thinking about it almost all day. I just can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I also called the police and was informed that the home and property are vacant. The wife left and is staying on the other side of the country with family, keeping her exact location confidential so that the husband doesn't try to contact or go after her. The husband cannot be within a certain distance to the home and is currently staying at a campground 50 miles away in his trailer. Seems to be just a repeat of last year. But then who the hell was that woman on the window? This didn't happen to me, but to my grandfather, who is a war veteran. Shortly after the Korean War, he and some of his friends had come back home and naturally celebrated their return. They lived in a very rural part of Southern California at the time. and to this day, the population is at peak, around 200 people. Anyway, my grandfather was driving home in the dead of night, with his friends piled in the car and sleeping, aside from his buddy riding shotgun. They were in the middle of the desert with nothing for miles, so it naturally should have been an easy-going ride home. My grandfather suddenly saw a strange dark figure up ahead, which looked like a person, and quickly began swerving out of the way to avoid hitting the guy. Right before he swerved, he got a better look at the person and saw he was completely draped in black robes. They pulled over after he swerved, and he did a quick double check, and the black-robed person was nowhere to be seen. The guys sleeping didn't see anything, but apparently the buddy riding shotgun saw it too. To this day, when my grandfather told me the story, he was 100% sure it was death. He didn't understand why he was there or for what, but that glimpse caught him right before he swerved, and had apparently been proof enough to make him think it had been death itself. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. Growing up, we lived on our family farm that has been lived in by my dad's family since the 1700s. So there's a lot of people who have lived and died there before. Growing up, I was always afraid of ghosts, especially anything that would hurt me. But it wasn't until I was about 8 that I realized ghosts can be kind of nice too. Not all of them want to scare you. Although I was little, I remember it all pretty vividly. I was sitting on the driveway with my dog playing with chalk, when my dog sat up and looked over at the old barn about 30 yards away. I didn't really care what my dog saw, but something kind of pulled me to look over there. And when I did, that's when I saw a younger looking woman with her hair done up, wearing a rose-colored dress. As soon as I saw her though, she was gone. She didn't dissipate or fade away. It's like she was never even there to begin with. Like I said, I was 8 at the time, so I ran inside and started crying to my mum about a woman over the barn. So she went out and looked around, and there was nothing. Fast forward to dinner that night. She brings it up to my dad, who curiously asks what she looked like. I explain her to him, and as soon as I mention the dress, he puts his fork down and goes to grab a shoebox from the parlor. He rifles through a bit before pulling out an old picture of the exact woman that I saw by the barn. When I confirmed that was her, my dad sat down with a tear in his eye and explained it was his mum, my grandmother. She died when he was 6, so I never met her and had no idea what she looked like. But my dad guessed her spirit had just been hanging out keeping an eye on me while I played, because that rose-colored dress was her favorite, and was the dress she was buried in. So, I had made a new friend in 7th grade, and we decided to have a sleepover at her house. She had a small bed, so she said that I could sleep in her room and she would sleep in her brother's room. He was always away. So I finally go to bed, and all night long, I feel like someone was staring at me. I kept waking up and impulsively looking at the same spot. Finally, morning comes, and I tell her what happened, and she proceeds to tell me her older brother was possessed as a child, and that his spirit, Charlie, follows her family around. I noped the hell out of there, and never slept over again. But wait, there's more. A few months later, I went back to her house to hang out, and we brought more friends, another 2 girls and 2 guys. Well, apparently Charlie doesn't like males, so we were in her room and all of a sudden the door slams shut. Screaming rings out from all around us. One of the guys tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. For the next 5-ish minutes, panic is going through all of us, while my friend who lives there is trying to calm us down. Finally, the door opens, and everyone was too scared to walk out, so I dumbly went first. So you have to round a corner to go downstairs in her house. I round the first corner, and the next thing I see is a picture frame flying off the wall straight towards me. It landed a good 2 feet away from me, and I bolted the hell down the stairs, and I never entered that house again. This is a true account of what happened to me, somewhere between 1992 to 1994. I was roughly 15 years old, and am female. My house was unbelievably haunted, not only by several spirits, but also a poltergeist that I had seemingly created completely unaware due to my teenage angst and my sensitivity abilities. I need to give you a quick layout of part of the house. So if you were looking at my house from my garden, the living room and dining room were on the ground floor, and on the second floor, my bedroom was on the right-hand side of the house. My parents' bedroom on the left. In between us was a box room with a window with no opening that had a tall chest of drawers which contained clean bedding and towels. The box room was a strange room. It was always hot in there. My house was cold all year round, even in summer still cold. The atmosphere in there felt thick and just really weird. It was a school night because my parents had gone to bed early, as they both had work, but I'm pretty sure it was the summer holidays, because I knew I wasn't in school the next day. So I stayed up to watch TV with my 20-year-old sister, as she was staying over on the couch. The reason she wouldn't sleep in the guest bedroom was because it was the most haunted room in the house. I've known this because it used to be my bedroom until my other sister moved out, and then I had her much bigger bedroom, which was at the front of the house as I described previously. So I think I went to bed around 1, and I switched my TV on and fell asleep. With only 4 channels, and one of them being Welsh, it was easy to fall asleep, and I couldn't actually sleep unless my TV was on anyway. Previously, when it had been switched off, I had seen a lot of shadows on the black screen, and even my dog had been reflected in it. And though he was on my bed with me, when he wasn't even in my bedroom. Very creepy. Just when I started to get sleepy, all hell broke loose. The house shook really hard. I thought it was an earthquake. The banging was so loud and hard. I remember sitting up in bed, in shock, reassuring myself it was just a mild earthquake. But after a few minutes, it got worse, and I realized that the noise was coming from the box room. I thought it was my sister looking for bedding, so I shouted, "Shut up, Joe, you're gonna wake Mum and Dad." And I listened out for a reply, and there was none. And my sister is definitely the type to reply. I then thought there's no possible way it could have been her, because I doubt she could even create that level of noise if she tried. It had escalated to pure pandemonium. That's the only way I can describe it. The ceiling was being banged on. The walls, the floors, and the house was shaking. I then thought perhaps my dad was snoring too loud, and my mum is looking for bedding to use in the guest bedroom while in a bad mood. I guess I wished it was her, and not something otherworldly. I was seriously petrified that I felt sick and was trembling. So many ghostly things happened to me in that house, but was this really another occurrence? I was used to having things thrown at me, or my stereo turning on full blast in the middle of the night, not to mention other stuff. But this? I manned up, got out of bed, and was scared stiff, but I opened my bedroom door to the pitch black landing. I have a huge phobia of the dark thanks to this house. so just being in the dark gave me chills to the bone, because deep down, I knew what it was. At that exact time as I opened my door, my mum was coming out of her bedroom, which was opposite mine, with the box room between us. Then my sister turned on the landing light and came halfway up the stairs so that she could see my mum and I, almost as though we had all done it in synchronicity. I had chills all over, and I was so scared. In the pit of my stomach, I had butterflies, and not the good kind. My mum and I stood staring at each other, and it was as though time stood still. We were in a state of confusion, because we were all accounted for. And to quote my mum, "Your dad's in bed, asleep, and Joe, you're on the stairs. So Emma, if you and me are right here, then who the hell is in there?" While we stood outside the box room, the pandemonium was still going on. However, as my mum said the "who the hell is in there" part, it stopped. Absolute silence. We all looked at each other. Then, almost on cue, the box room door handle started to turn really slowly. We all fled back to our respective beds. I locked my door, got under my covers, and was so terrified. If it could create that type of noise, to me it was pretty clear that it could harm us. Me, no doubt. I somehow fell asleep, and before I knew it, it was morning. After breakfast, my sister came into the kitchen and asked if I'd been into the box room. I said, no chance, not on my own. She then suggested it could have been our cat, who liked to jump into the open drawers and sleep on our clothes. So for that reason, in every chest of drawers in the house, a drawer always has to be left half open, due to her being trapped once. A cat? You actually think a cat could create that? I wasn't aware we had a lion, Joe. So the two of us went up there. We knew the room would be smashed up. There was no way it couldn't have been. Being the eldest, Joe pulled the handle and opened the door. We were both gobsmacked. Everything was as it should be. It was tidy, and not a thing was out of place. We were both in shock. Just a few hours earlier, it sounded like it was being smashed up. We looked at each other in confusion. This leads me to another occurrence that happened when I had the back bedroom prior to the box room incident. It was the exact same thing in the study, which was directly under my bedroom. Pandemonium and chaos during the middle of the night. Except I was the only one that could hear it. It went on for a good 20 minutes, but to me it felt much longer. I started crying. Every occurrence, except a few, was to affect me, scare me, hurt me. I was at my wit's end. Nobody believed it was a poltergeist. I got the blame because this time the room had been trashed, pages ripped out of valuable books. My parents were fuming, and they grounded me over it. I really don't care if people believe me or not. I know it's true, and I know what I went through the whole time that I lived there. My grandmother lived with my family for about 4 years before she passed. We were inseparable, and even though she had Alzheimer's, she always remembered my name and who I was. Before I was born, she got into an accident at work and broke her femur, and had to have it replaced with a metal rod, leaving her with a limp and a very distinctive walk/thumping sound. When she died, I was home alone for the first time over the summer, while my parents were at work, and I was 10 years old. I would lock myself in my room every day, because I could hear her thumping noise walking closer and closer to my door. No one in my family believed me, but it was so realistic, I have a hard time doubting it was just my imagination. I've also seen many apparitions of men in suits in and around my house. A very distinctive one was glowing white, and went to walk down my stairs, but turned to look at me before going down. I think I might be losing my mind. This happened months ago. I'm just sharing it now, as a friend of mine recommended it. What I'm about to tell you is all my own account. I'm the only person who can verify this is true, as I was the only witness. My mum and siblings were also in the house this night, and they can confirm the aftermath. However, not the actual event. It started with a nightmare. In my nightmare, I was driving. It had been raining and still was, so the roads were slippery. I had my dog Luna in the car with me. As I'm driving, I look up ahead and notice that past a certain point on the road, all of the cars keep wrecking. So to avoid wrecking, I pull over and decide I'll take Luna and I to a cafe I see. Outside the cafe, along the exterior wall on the way to the door, there are small tables in sets of 2. At the small table nearest me, there sits a mother, her son, and their dog. As Luna and I passed this table, I immediately knew something was horribly wrong. The air had turned freezing cold almost instantly. It had become misty, and you could see my breath. Luna had stopped in her tracks and was peering over towards the family at their table, whimpering. The mum and son were frozen, icy, with horrible, pain-filled expressions on their faces. Their dog was behind them, drowned in a nearby gutter. Then I just started running. As I'm running, my dream changes. I'm no longer in the same scenery or doing the same thing. I didn't even have control of the dream. I was just witnessing it. It's hot and sweaty, and now I'm on my way to meet someone. I know exactly where I'm going. It's this house, maybe better described as a bungalow. It was made out of bamboo, but the inside was nicely furnished. When I walked in, I didn't turn on any lights. I walked directly to the front window, where I stood behind some curtains and patiently waited for my mystery person to arrive. It wasn't long, and someone else was coming. Except, the closer they got, the less it looked like a person walking, and more like a shadow figure floating towards me. This is in my dream. I'm not scared. I feel prepared to meet whoever this is. When they get to the door, I know they must be inside, right behind me, and I don't even turn around. I start hearing voices. Coming for you. It was all about something or someone coming for me. I finally turn around, and the figure rushes at me. It's at this point I wake up. I woke up because I felt a chill on my arm, which had been dangling over the edge of my bed. The chill felt like someone's hair had just brushed over my arm. I opened my eyes and adjusted for a second when I finally looked up from my arm, and I noticed there's someone standing on the bed next to me. My first thought was that it was my sister, as she borrows my headphones often. Maybe she'd bent over to pick them up, and her hair was the chill I felt. However, the more I looked at this person, the more I knew it wasn't the case. He was glowing. There was this ball of light, almost blue, in the middle of his chest area. His white hair seemed to float with the wind from my ceiling fan. He reminded me of a candle flame. This way, his whole body seemed to dance with any motion in the wind. I stared at him, and he stared back at me, with huge orb eyes for what seemed like a long time. I was trying to take in every detail, trying to convince myself this wasn't real. He kept cocking his head from side to side like a confused puppy. He seemed childlike, but also not. He finally decided to push his boundaries, and he took a step towards me. I pushed myself away from him onto the other side of my bed against the wall. The second I did, he left. The way he left was honest to God beautiful. It was like I audibly heard someone blow him out, just as you would a candle. He just left, with whatever wind took him. It's hard to perfectly describe. I never screamed, but the second it was over, I just got this wave of emotions and started bawling my eyes out. I ran to my mum's room and told her everything. She believed me, and says it was just a lost spirit. I don't tell many people about this. I don't like talking about it. To this day, I can no longer sleep unless the light is on. I get panic attacks when thinking or talking about this incident for too long. As I'm recounting this, I'm shaking. I wanted to hear others' thoughts on my story, and see if anyone has had any similar experiences to share. I don't have any artistic talent, so unfortunately drawing up a visual might be difficult, but I'm more than willing to work with someone who can. Thank you to everyone who heard this. My mum died at her home, and I was with her for the final days of her life. We put a hospital bed in the living room, and I was on night duty. My mum would wake up at the randomest times and be laughing and caring and have full conversations with someone. At one point she was laughing so hard and told me to pick up my brother's playing cards. She kept throwing them on the floor. Her brother was her best friend and was coaching a baseball game when she died 15 years ago of a sudden heart attack. She rarely mentioned him after death because it was so traumatic for her. So it really caught me off guard when she talked to him like he was there. She was awake and coherent with me and could clearly see something I could not. Fast forward 6 months. My mum had passed away, and I was back in the same living room all alone. I called my 9-year-old nephew to FaceTime, and we chatted for a bit. Then he suddenly got all quiet, scrunched up his nose and looked very confused. He said, "Who's that man?" I was like, "Huh? I'm home alone." Then all of a sudden I got really scared and asked, "What man?" "The one in baseball clothes who keeps walking back and forth behind you." My mind was blown. A couple of days later, I asked him to describe the man to me, and my nephew told me very specific things about the guy he saw. I knew that he was describing my uncle. Black hair, moustache, wearing baseball clothes, and after that, I knew without a doubt there is a life beyond here, and I truly believe we have angels among us. When I was 8, my grandma came to visit and slept in the spare room. I had gotten up early one morning, and we went with one of my brothers and laid in bed with Grandma to talk. I then asked if she saw the shadow at the end of the bed. She told us both that she could. Then my grandma crawled to the end of the bed, and the shadow melted into the ground. We still talk about this almost 30 years later. I also used to live a block away from a cemetery, and I saw a lot of strange stuff. I would see people in the cemetery, and then something would block my view and they would be gone when I'd look again. This happened more times than I could count. There was another night that the cemetery was completely black. No light shined from it, and when my headlights on my car shined in, they didn't work. I thought that they were off, but they came on automatically. I tried shining my high beams, and you still couldn't see. There was another occasion where I could see dark ghosts, for lack of a better term, flying at a single grave, and they would just melt into a giant ball of black atop of the grave. It was very creepy. I also had to drive by 3 churches to get to and from work, and one day on my way home, I saw 3 extremely tall figures in all white gliding down the sidewalk. As I drove closer, they faded into nothing. I also lived in a house that an old lady died in. My dog would sit in one corner of a bedroom and act like he was being petted. That same corner of the room would always have all the toys pushed out of it, as if my kids left them there. It was a nice ghost, though. When I was younger, I would always see a silhouette of a man in the main hallway of my childhood home. He would stand outside on my bedroom and watch over me. My brother also saw him. Those were the ones that always came to mind when I talk about ghosts and paranormal stuff. It's all kind of normalized for me, since I've experienced it most of my life. I'll see things that others don't, or I'll notice my stuff has moved, as I'm very organized and I have lived alone for a while. Maybe I'll notice my dogs are acting weird in the same areas that I get weird feelings from. There have been 3 times I have seen and felt spirits. The first time was around my mum. She was talking about her late father, my grandpa, who I adored, but lost when I was rather young. She started feeling cold on her left side, and moments later, I saw a light shim in my vision. It looked like a man hunched over, his hand placed on her left arm. It was there not just for a second, and even after rubbing my eyes and looking away, and back to it, I still saw it. It was there. Not as clear as one would imagine seeing a spirit, but he was clearly there. The second time around was with my now ex-girlfriend. We were talking about something to do during dinner. I thought she poked my side, and when I looked at her asking what's up, she said nothing. And when I looked at her mother, who said her daughter was talking with her and did not poke me, I saw a small boy with a bowl haircut standing next to her, just like the shim I saw my grandfather in. I described the boy, and the mother said it might have been her son, who she'd lost some time ago. Later, the same spirit, the boy, pushed me when we were walking in the forest, as if he wished to play, and then ran ahead of me. I think there was a ghost of a little girl in a house I lived in West Atlanta. One summer day I was home alone, and left but forgot my sunglasses. I went back to the house to look for them. I said out loud, "I just had them," and immediately a sing-song voice mockingly replied, "I just had them." I said out loud, "And I don't need them," and noped out of there. A few weeks later, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner. My 4-year-old son was watching Super Y. I had full view of him. We were the only ones home. On the show, the character Wyatt asks, "What's your name?" And I hear, "Angel," clear as day. My son hadn't said anything, didn't react, and just kept momming, because I wasn't really scared. I was just startled. I mean, the ghost is watching PBS. The other odd thing that happened is a light bulb had screwed out of the dining room chandelier and placed on a table 3 feet away. Scarves I had draped over a hook in my bedroom somehow got tied, and only adults could reach them, and my husband swore he hadn't done it either. And I believed him, because his reaction was that of being so incredibly freaked out. Both of my maternal grandparents died before I was born, so I've obviously never met them. When I was around 5 weeks old, I got really sick and almost died. They even had a priest come in and read me my last rites, fearing I wouldn't make it out of the NICU. I lived, but continued to have related health problems, including asthma and croup, basically waking up completely out of breath and unable to take a breath in or out. I'm the youngest by 4 years, so when my siblings went to school, it was just me and my mum. We lived in a pretty big house, and my room was upstairs and far from the staircase. My mum and friends she has had over have both told me this to be true. There have been times when I had croup as an infant, and my mum would be in the kitchen, and the cabinets would fly open, and stuff would come crashing out. She knew this was the sign to check on me. She has also heard pounding in my room, which definitely couldn't have been the suffocating infant. I just want to say thank you to my grandparents for watching over me like that. I don't think I would be here today if it weren't for their ghosts. When I was 6 years old, my father, who was in the United States Air Force, was stationed in Upper Hayford in the UK. We lived in a village in Warwickshire in a 150-year-old house that had very old wooden floors that were uneven and would creak with every step. One day I had a friend over, and we thought to go upstairs to my room and play. My room was the first room along a hallway at the end of the stairs. The other rooms on the hallway were for storage, and at the end of the hall, a stairway that led up to the attic. My friend and I took turns rolling my Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars down the hallway outside my room towards the stairs to the attic. Because the floors were uneven, the cars would go about 3/4 of the way down the hall. We kept going into my room to find more toys that we could roll down the hall, and came across a toy motorcycle about the size of an adult's hand that had square-edged tires, so it was capable of standing by itself. When we rolled it down the hall, it went all the way down to where the attic stairs were, and toppled over on its side. We went into my room again to find more cars, and when we got back into the hallway, I looked to the end of the hall and saw the motorcycle. It was standing straight up facing towards my room. I asked my friend if he saw it fall, and he confirmed that he saw it fall down, and that it had been facing the attic stairs. He had been with me the whole time looking for cars to roll down the hall, so I know he didn't move the motorcycle. I called my mum to see if she was there, and she responded from downstairs. My dad was still at the Air Force Base. If she or anyone had come up the stairs, we would have heard them as the floors creak. Our dog was downstairs with her, and if he'd have come up, I could have heard his nails clicking on the wooden floor. To this day, 40 years later, I have no explanation for how the toy that was on its side turned upright and reversed without making a sound. This story happened to my mostly skeptical sister. They had an old TV, not flat screen, which would pop up a message at the top when it was turned on or off. You could program what it would say, but it was hello and goodbye by default, and they had never changed the message. They were living in a very old house in historical Stonington, Connecticut. Not one of the big, nice houses in the main part of the village. They lived in a sort of poor people house off the side on the edge of town, old enough to have cloth around the wiring instead of modern plastic and horsehair plaster. She never really liked that place, but it was what they could afford. A few times, she and her boyfriend were sitting in the living room and talking while the TV was on. Every once in a while, the TV would display a message like it did when it turned on or off, but it wasn't hello or goodbye. It would say things related to what they were talking about, like, "That's true," or would say something like, "Phone will ring," right before the phone rang. My sister and her boyfriend would pretty much leave the room when that happened. They got rid of the TV as soon as they could. From what they remember, she said that it also happened in the next house they moved into, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I was laying in bed when I was about 12 years old. I was on the verge of falling asleep when I heard what sounded like a box dropping onto hardwood floor. I thought nothing of it, because this has happened to me before while on the verge of falling asleep. The second time I heard it, I knew it was real, because I was wide awake. About 3 seconds later, my burglar alarm went off. I shot out of bed and ran into my mum's room and waited in the closet for the police to arrive. When they showed up, we all went downstairs and our jaws dropped. Every single cabinet in the kitchen was open. Every plate, every glass, every bowl smashed into a million pieces on the ground. We thought of it as a breaking and entering, and so did the cops, until my mother realized that every door and window was still locked, and there was no sign of a break-in. You'd also think that we would have heard all the glass and smashing downstairs, but my mother turned off the burglar alarm about 50 to 20 seconds after it went off, and we heard nothing but silence. The police concluded that there were no signs of a break-in, and we had basically to go about our normal lives pretending this didn't happen. My mum put the house up for sale 4 sleepless months later. I believe I was a target for demonic possession or something paranormal for most of my childhood and young adult life. I have a lot of stories about my experiences, but I always highlight a few of them when I tell people. I was raised to believe in whatever I wanted by my family. They are not churchgoers, however, they are mainly agnostic, and I am atheist. My mum didn't believe me for years, and now she does. My best friend didn't believe me, and now he does. My ex didn't believe me, and now she does. I've thought about going to church just to ask for some information. However, I haven't been bothered by it for a few years now. Take what you want from this. I pride myself on my honesty, and all of this is true. The first recollection I have of it was in grade 2. I was in bed trying to fall asleep. This orb was floating around my room. It was white on the black and slightly opaque, just whizzing around the room. I was scared right away. It randomly stopped, and it felt like it was looking at me. Then I just froze in fear. It charged me, and I snapped out of the paralysis and ran to my mum's room, who was angry that I woke her up and put me back into my room. This was when I started to sleep under the covers, with a light on, until I was 19. I was haunted for years. Little things would happen. Little stuff would go missing, or things would be moved. Not like your car keys or wallet, but my glasses would not be there where I placed them right on the nightstand beside me when I fell asleep. They would all of a sudden be downstairs on a counter or in a cupboard. I would feel like something was watching me from time to time, and not that normal sixth sense stuff you feel when someone is watching you. Completely different level. Stuff like this became a semi-normal life for me. Whenever we moved, it would follow. Let's start with grade 11, around Christmas. My mother just got divorced, and we, my mother, me, and my cat, Tiger, were living at my grandparents' home. My mum was on vacation in a warm country, and my grandparents were in Arizona. I was in the house all by myself. This isn't some Hollywood scary grandparents' house. It was a premium new condo in the suburbs. My room was downstairs, and when you leave the bedroom there's a big living room straight in front with an older TV in the corner, directly in the corner of the living room. There was also a bathtub to the left. I woke up in the middle of the night, not being able to breathe. I felt a force on top of me, and not like a fatty sitting on you, but as if the blankets on top were not movable. That feeling I mentioned about something watching you was now stronger than it ever had been. The door, which I had closed, was wide open, and all the lights were off, including the lamp. I always leave it on when I go to sleep. I always leave it on. I was terrified. This was the scariest moment of my life. Then all of a sudden, Tiger, my pet cat, jumped on my bed. all bushy-tailed and hissing. The lights turned on by themselves, and I was relieved by, which is my best guess, it. Tiger jumps off the bed and stays in the bedroom at the door, staring all bushy-tailed and hissing at this corner of the living room where the TV is. It's pitch black, and I felt it instantly when I looked into the corner. This horrible, intent feeling, like when someone you hate is looking at you with the intention to kill. This corner of the living room should have been lit up from the light in the bedroom, but it was pitch black. I had to call my uncle and tell him I needed him to pick me up right away. He had to come to my bedroom to behold me in underwear, because I was too scared to get dressed in case it came after me again. Tiger's eyes didn't leave the corner of that room until my uncle came back. My uncle got mad at me when I told him the reason he had to wake up to get me. Thankfully, by this time, my mum already believed me. And I'm 17, ladies and gents. A fully grown young man had to call his uncle to get him. My best thoughts on Tiger saving me was that the ancient Egyptians believe about cats. Look it up. I think there's a little truth in everything. My memory gets a little fuzzy here. However, I was hanging out with my best friend at his house, and he's known about it, but doesn't believe anything I tell him. Until this night. My best buddy's family are rich. He has a big double-door entrance room with one very small window and this huge king-size bed and an 80-inch computer monitor, which really is just a TV. We were downstairs in his room on his bed watching Paranormal Activity 1 on the computer monitor while eating pizza. The doors were closed and the tiny window shut. The pizza box was set up on the computer chair in front of the TV. The whole bottom of the box was on the seat with a whole pizza in the bottom part of the pizza box, with the lid open very little. So in the middle of this movie, the pizza box lid folds up and opens completely by itself. We'll look at each other and look back, and the pizza box shoots off the chair and lands on the floor. After that, my best friend believed me and started to hate it. I came over a different time and we were talking about it, and he randomly got up all mad and started to mock and attempt to talk to it by yelling into the air. He said something along the lines of, "Leave my friend alone, you coward," blah blah blah. We hung out and it was time to go to sleep. I passed out on the couch in the downstairs living room, and he fell asleep on the recliner. This was the first time it had done something to someone besides me. I was already half asleep when all of this happened. So this story is what he had told me the next morning, which I remember some parts of. So he was sleeping and woke up to the flashlight being on, which was odd. So he guessed it was it. He tried to wake me up, which I just said to go back to sleep. He screwed the light in all the way, so there was no way to turn it back on, then put it down. He woke up again to the light on. I remember this light turning on and him freaking out with what happened next. So he shut it off again, and this time woke up to being pulled out of the recliner with the light on again. It scared him, and we actually never spoke about it for a long time after that. My ex was Mexican and a Catholic. She had Jesus pictures and crosses and other Catholic stuff everywhere. She knew about it, and it took a few months after we moved in together for her to believe me. That weird stuff happened whenever I was home. After she believed me, she wanted to go to a card reader who was a friend of hers. She promised that she didn't say anything about it to the card reader or anything pertaining to scary stuff. However, this card reader was horrified by the card she drew. She said something was following me, which I already knew. This story happened to my dad in the late 80s. His sister used to live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and my dad was down there to visit her. One day she was busy, so he decided to occupy himself for a few hours until she was available. He went to the French Quarter to check it out, having never been before. He happened upon what he described as a little voodoo store. He walked in and immediately didn't feel right. The floor was hot. The floorboards were made of wood, which were older and a little warped, probably from being mopped often, and otherwise seemed normal, except they were hot. At the back of the store, which was filled with all kinds of weird knickknacks and things you'd pretty much expect to be associated with a voodoo-oriented place, like bones and tinctures and feathers and other things, there was an old lady sitting by herself. He assumes she was the shop owner or attendant. She got his attention when she simply said, "Hello, Michael." That's my dad's name. He looks at her and tries to respond. She was obviously blind. Both eyes were completely cloudy and milky white. He didn't say anything. He just noped the hell out of there and left. I was at my dad's. My stepsister, my father, my stepmother, our dog, and myself were at the house. My dad has his stereo hooked up through the living room, so it will play surround sound. To shut everything down, you must turn off the TV and the stereo system. Otherwise, you'll have picture and no sound, or have a TV with no picture, and sound throughout the living room. I usually slept out in the living room on the couch. At least I used to. One night I was getting ready to sleep. I turned the speaker down low so that I could have some background noise while I tried to sleep. I think around 15 minutes passed. The light from the TV went away, and the sound from the speakers stopped. I thought that it was very odd, and before I could react, I heard something that made me freeze in fear. The massive living room was filled with a moaning that no human or animal could make. The only thing I could do was cover my ears and bury myself in my pillow. I lay on the couch, listened to my heart pounding out of my chest, and the sound of wind chimes filled my ears. I was terrified. It felt like something was in the room with me, and even more so because we didn't own any wind chimes. I finally worked up the courage and ran through the house and barricaded myself in my stepsister's room and covered myself on the floor. I could feel something lurking outside the room and remember crying. I somehow made it through the night and told my family what had happened. They brought up times that other paranormal events had happened in that house, and it took me 3 years to be able to sleep in that living room again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. So I had a pretty rubbish morning today. How many was it? About 20 videos? Instantly demonetized. And last night's, of course. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I think YouTube have me on their blacklist. So I'm just going to be straight with you all. I can't keep making videos if YouTube are going to be like, "Hey, thanks. You don't get paid." You know, that's not cool. They do remonetize the videos, but only after they've picked up a significant amount of views. Usually about 2 days turnaround, to be honest. And, you know, I miss out, and I don't think that's fair. I put a lot of effort into finding the stories, curating everything, reading them, editing them. It's a long process. And to put all that working and get next to nothing out because YouTube, you know, the YouTube bot decides that, is not really fair, in my opinion anyway. So I'm gonna see if today's video is demonetized. And let's be honest guys, there was nothing bad in this video. I selected all my words carefully. I didn't swear. There were no words that I thought, there was no combination of words that I thought this could have meant this was demonetized, so I'll have to wait and see. But if it is, it will confirm in my mind that I'm on YouTube's blacklist. And if that's the case, what I'm going to have to start doing is having all my videos set in advance. Now, it's not that easy to do. You can obviously put it up in advance, but I mean, I can't produce a video every day. And, you know, more than that, if you get what I mean, I can't make a video for today and tomorrow and the next day all in the same day. It's just incredibly exhausting. So I'm going to see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, I might do one video, then not do a video, then another video, then not do a video, until I've built up about 5 or 6 videos in the future. And that will give YouTube time to demonetize me, and then hopefully time to also remonetize me. So that way it's a win-win. So ultimately what can be summed up very quickly is that if YouTube are targeting me, then we're going to have intermittent stories for the next week. But if they're not, then, you know, business as usual, I suppose. Yeah, it's pretty tricky. It's very, very sad, to be honest. Quite disheartening, really. I'm not going to quit, so don't start thinking I'm going to quit, but I just wanted to let you know that this is happening. It's a little bit frustrating, but we just got to keep going and you know, not let this bring us down. But anyway, I've spoken for far too long. Thank you for watching the video. You can leave a like if you want. That's pretty good. Drop a comment. If you actually listen this long and haven't subscribed, maybe you want to do that too. There should be new stories nearly every day. So, you know, press the bell icon if you want to know about that. But yeah, take care, guys. For now, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.